New tonight, the North Carolina sheriff whose deputy shot and killed Andrew Brown is now leading the calls for the release of the body cam, something that can only happen with a court order. Now, that sheriff says he's going to file the motion himself on Monday. And as the body cam and cell phone videos of other deadly police confrontations with Black Americans pile up, we want to look tonight at what Washington is doing and not doing in response to this. Democratic Representative Stacey Plaskett serves in the Congressional Black Caucus. She was an assistant DA in New York City and served at the Justice Department under President George W. Bush, and she is now the delegate to the Virgin Islands. Congresswoman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with you.
So let's start with Attorney General Merrick Garland. He took two major steps this week. First, the DOJ opened a civil rights investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department 1 day after Derek Chauvin's conviction in the George Floyd murder. These kind of pattern or practice investigations were almost non-existent in the Trump administration. There were 25 in the Obama era. Do federal probes into local police departments actually make them better police departments?
I think they do, because we need to have accountability and transparency. For the most part, to me, the Chauvin guilty verdict was not about justice, but it was about accountability. And having the Justice Department look at accountability in police departments is very important to maintain that accountability at the local level by injecting federal oversight over that. In discussions that the Congressional Black Caucus had with the FBI agency and with the head of the FBI, Chris Wray, one of the things that they pointed out is that presently police departments are not mandated to give data on bad police officers, on officers which have had complaints against them. Part of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is to make that mandatory so that departments who do not have issues in the Virgin Islands, we do not have police officers who are not members of the community. We've not had issues with regard to unjustified police shootings. But should officers come to the Virgin Islands who have had that, because there is not mandatory data input, we do not have that and cannot shield ourselves, our good police officers, from bad police officers. Presently, only 40% of police departments give that information. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would make that mandatory, along with the myriad of other components of that legislation to not only support good policing, but to protect American citizens as well.
So you have that legislation that has not been passed into law. You also have DOJ, as I mentioned, and the AG taking some steps. The other move that he announced Friday was he said he was going to meet with the biggest law enforcement organizations. The Wall Street Journal reports that he made it very clear that he plans an ambitious civil rights agenda, particularly focused on overhauling troubled local agencies. I'm curious what you think. Does making that kind of sweeping promise put every police department, troubled or not, in a defensive posture with not only Washington, but the public they serve?
Well, I would hope not. I would think the police departments that are doing good policing would be models by which the Department of Justice could use to support other police agencies that have issues, using good policing to show others how they can model it and support it. The Justice Department going in and reviewing police agencies, if you have nothing to hide, you should really be open to supporting those police officers and those police departments which have had problems in the past. Because the models for good policing range throughout this country. We cannot take what works in New York City and assume that it's going to work in Frederickstead on the island of St. Croix, nor can we expect it to work in a small town in Alabama. But if we have a range of police departments that are doing good policing, they can support those who need support. And as my father, who was a New York City police officer for 30 years, my grandfather, a police officer here in the Virgin Islands, said, the thing that most good police officers hate the most are bad police officers. They're the ones who make policing very difficult, and we need to weed those bad police out so good police officers can do the work that the American public has asked them to do.
And speaking of the American public, there is this poll out this week that shows 6 out of 10 Americans want the U.S. to hold police more accountable when it comes to mistreatment of black people. And on Capitol Hill, as you know, Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott and Congresswoman Karen Bass have been holding these informal talks on reform legislation. The sticking points include qualified immunity and so-called Section 242, which civil rights groups say makes it nearly impossible to prosecute an officer for a civil rights violation. How likely do you think it is that both parties can find common ground for a deal? And are you open at all to Tim Scott's proposal that he wants police departments, not individual officers, held liable? What do you think?
Well, I have not seen Senator Scott's proposal at this time and not been able to review it. I believe that the George Floyd Justice and Police accountability is the bill to go with, and I'm open to hear from him as to what changes may be there. But I agree with you, Pamela, that for the most part, as an attorney, qualified immunity is an area that we must address. And I would shirk at any legislation which does not address qualified immunity. For instance, in 2001, the court had doctrine which created a mandatory sequencing standard in which someone and victims' constitutional rights were first looked at and then determined whether those rights were established and then if there were violations. 8 years later, in another Supreme Court in Pearson, the court reversed that and instead held that the lower court had discretion to grant qualified immunity on the ground that the law was not clear. Qualified immunity has in many instances become the hood for bad police officers to in fact act as modern-day Ku Klux Klan members against black and brown people in this country, and it has got to stop. The most conservative members of the Supreme Court say that Congress needs to do something about qualified immunity, and we cannot shirk our responsibility to victims and Americans at large because we are afraid of unions or talking points or those on the right who have used the blue wall as a shield against American justice.
But let me just really quick, because I know you had said you had not seen Tim Scott's proposal, but the bottom line is his idea is to make sure police departments, so in the cases you outlined, the police departments would be held liable, not the individual police officers. If that's what it took to agree to that, to get a police reform deal done, would you be open to that? Would that be acceptable to you?
You know, I would have to look at that again and really review it. My first reaction is that police departments, if they have created an environment in which a police officer is able to act with impunity, then yes, that police department should be held liable. But there are bad actor individual police officers who should not sully entire departments by their bad acting. And if there is a rogue police officer, that individual needs to stand accountable for their actions as well.
All right, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.